Good morning. You're listening to Drinking Socially, the official Untappd podcast.
Your weekly look into what's happening in the Untappd community and the world of beer. This episode is brought to you by Untappd and the Untappd store. Use the coupon code PODCAST to get 20% off your next purchase. Lots of holiday shopping going on. Save some money, grab some cool Untappd swag.
Thanks, Harrison. And I'm going to bring us into this episode by saying, holy cow, I can't believe it's been a whole year since Harrison and I were talking about last year's year in beer. Right. And so that's the only way I've been able to keep track of time so far in 2020. But what a joyful quagmire this year has been. And instead of reflect on the things we wish were different, we're going to focus this episode on things that have been great. So we're officially halfway through our Advent box, which has been the most I've tweeted in my whole life. If you follow us on Twitter, you'll see me and Harrison fumbling through beers and bottle openers every day. We're bringing some Pennsylvania madness to the show today, and we're also recapping our Untappd year in beer, which most of you have probably seen in the last 2 days. But we're excited to see you sharing that with us in the Facebook group, on Untappd social media, and I can't wait to see if Harrison has more uniques than I did this year and more badges. I can make a safe prediction that we both drank a lot of beer at home. But let's get the show started, Harrison. What's in the box?
I'm glad you asked, John. It is, as you said, some madness from old Pennsylvania way. Mad Elf, Tröegs, Independent Brewing's Mad Elf. This beer is the bomb, for lack of a better intro. Although maybe I'm a week early on that. But so Mad Elf, let's get to the facts. A Belgian strong dark ale coming in at 11%. And from Tröegs, the holidays at Tröegs start with our inner Mad Elf momentarily taking over the brew deck. So blame him for this cheerful ruby red creation brewed with honey, cherries, and Belgian yeast reminiscent of cinnamon, clove, and allspice. It's a favorite of mine every year. John's already opened his. I'm going to get to mine, but I have a fair amount of some stories that I can share about this beer. We'll get to that, but it looks as kind of red as I remember. What's the first sip, John? What's happening?
I want to make a joke about saving this beer for a year and putting it on a shelf and having a Mad Elf on the shelf, but I just did. I forced it in there. You asked me about how it tastes, right? The aroma, I wish my Christmases smelt like this. On the nose, it just smells like sweet candy fruit, but the flavor, it's like beer. What's the gift that you bought your grandma in 1979 and it just keeps getting passed around? Fruitcake?
Fruitcake, yeah, exactly.
I've never tasted fruitcake.
No one
I had
has.
A couple of fruitcake.
No one's ever eaten one.
They just made 50 of them in the 30s and they're still getting shared today.
It's mold. It's not fruit now. It's just mold coming out of that thing.
In my head, this is what fruitcake would taste like. I get a little bit of the spices of Christmas. You mentioned clove and cinnamon, I think, or allspice.
Yep.
Tröegs makes beautiful beers, and I've had this a few times, but it's probably been about 2, maybe 3 years since I've drank a Mad Elf. So on the nose, for me, right off the gun, it tastes like Christmas, a warm family gathering, or in this case, gathering of two. What about you, Harrison? I saw your face lit up as soon as you took that in.
Yeah, again, as a guy who kind of spent his formative drinking years in Pennsylvania, this beer has a lot of kind of memories in each sniff. I can't believe they sell it in 6-packs. It's 11%, and it comes in 6-packs. So hats off to Tröegs for just not changing their ways. Good on you. It's always been 6-packs. But the nose for me is all cherries. Almost like candied cherry, like almost maraschino, like the fancier, the dark cherries that you get in an old fashioned and
Italian,
right, in some cool hip bar somewhere. They charge you extra for, but it kind of smells like that. But it tastes kind of like that, like dark it's like candied dark fruits, like dark dates or something. It's very, but it's that candiedness too that I absolutely love about really most Belgian beers, or a lot of them have that character, especially the darker ones, like this one and doubles. So yeah, and then but the cherries in the nose. I'm hoping as this warms up, kind of more of that the spices start to come through, which can usually be the case. Kind of let that Belgian yeast do its thing, and have those kind of more effervescent flavors, those phenols start to get out of the bottle that I've been living in for a bit. So looking forward to that. But straight away, a beautiful color, cherry on the nose, candy everywhere else. Well,
in a world of pastry stouts, this is much different than like a fruited sour IPA. Though this is like candy from an old woman's purse.
Exactly. Yeah, right. It's not a Werther's original, but it's like, right, it's wrapped in, clear, whatever.
Werther's that sat next to one of those strawberry candies that only looks like a strawberry, but tastes like plastic.
Tastes like sharp, just tastes like pain on the top of your mouth, right?
That's not a knock on Mad Elf, sorry. No, it tastes much better than that strawberry plastic
Right, this
candy.
is what that candy wished it tasted like. If it did, a lot less would be getting done. A lot happier old folks, maybe. Yeah, and I know what you mean. It's kind of like, it's a classic candy. It's really kind of like, malt shoppy almost. When penny candy actually cost a penny. Now I feel like I'm 100. But yeah, no, there's something very like, for lack of a better word, like very real about the candy flavor. It doesn't feel like somebody put candy in this. It feels like, candy was inspired by these flavors. Because again, there's no candy in here. It's, real cherries and honey. And that's kind of what's imparting what, maybe you can pick up in a different way in certain candies, certain places. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and now I'm getting way more cherry and like the mouthfeel too, or the flavor. This is great.
And this beer's, it's been made by Tröegs for a while. It's got a high ABV. It's truly an angry little helper of Santa Claus. But in my head, I equate this, I would say this is like the Christmas version of pumpkin. There's a lot of pumpkin beers, but pumpkin is the one that everyone knows. There's a lot of Christmas beers, and there's more, I think, of an international Christmas beer scene than there is for pumpkin beers. But Mad Elf is easily, I think, recognizable. It's iconic around this time of year, so I'm grateful that we get to share it together.
It is. It ages well, and this time of year. And I think they used to, they may still, but I think they do a batch of it in July for like local. They do Naked Elf, which is like no cherries in it, which is cool. I think either every once in a while, or maybe that's the one in the summer they do. But yeah, right. Definitely in Pennsylvania, like the beer of the winter. But really, wherever Tröegs goes and wherever good beer is consumed, I should say, and this beer either is sought after or people wish they'd get their hands on it. So if you haven't had it yet and you can, we definitely urge you to seek it out because it's perfect. Right? So it's, as you said, John, it kind of tastes like Christmas, but also it's 11%. It's like it's cold out, great. Have a couple Mad Elves, and then all is right. It's all good. So definitely kind of serves a lot of purposes for this time of year.
And so that 11%, and now that we've mentioned it a few times, it's a big part of this beer. If Mad Elf was a Belgian double, right, and we're sitting at like 6.5%, 7% there, would Mad Elf be as popular? I don't know, but I know the 11%. Whether your in-laws are coming over for Christmas or not,
right?
That the Mad Elf is really helpful to get through, taking all the glitter off of your Christmas tree or
the floor and the dog, wherever the glitter's ended up.
Yeah. Are there Christmas trees without glitter in the world in 2020?
I don't know. Probably not anymore. Once I got the first Christmas tree, I feel like it was only a matter of time before it spread to all others. I feel like ours doesn't have it, but I also feel like I pick glitter out of the couch every other day. So glitter is somewhere in the house, maybe in the HVAC. That's something to look into.
So Here's a terrible transition, but I meant to bring up the BJCP guideline.
Yes.
We haven't drank. This Tröegs classifies this as a Belgian dark strong ale.
Indeed.
And just recently we were talking about American strong ales and Grand Crus and the vagueness of that term. But the BJCP, there's actual parameters for a Belgian dark strong. It's even though similar in name, it's a real style.
Yep, absolutely.
Or defined style, generally defined as a dark and complex, very strong Belgian ale. Arguably, that could be all of them outside of the very strong, but you'll notice a delicious, subjectively delicious blend of malt richness. You'll get some dark fruit flavor in there and spicy elements, which I almost always attribute Belgian yeast to bringing a spicy, not jalapeno, but a spicy flavor to my beer. Yeah. And so that's the overall impression of a Belgian dark strong. And I'll definitely agree with that dark fruit flavor.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of tying into the rich strawberry Werther's Original caramel candy in this beer.
Yes.
The appearance as well, I think any Belgian dark I've had, this kind of, it's dark, but it leans into like a reddish coppery color.
Yeah.
And the BJCP will advise you of that. So some comments they give us about this beer are that you can find an authentic Trappist version, which will usually be a little bit more drier, or if we were in Belgium, you might say more digestible than the Abbey version, which are going to be sweeter. So if you're drinking them blind and it tastes very dry, it might even be authentically Trappist. Otherwise, if it's sweet, it could be an Abbey version or even more of an American version as well. Traditionally, they're bottle conditioned, which is something we talked about a lot in our cellaring episode. You can generally sit on these beers for a while. And most of them are known generally by their strength or color designation if you're talking about Trappist beers, but we will do that in a time, season 4. Harrison, one of the things I wanted to ask you about in this beer, some of the ingredients that they put in here, which are characteristic to a Belgian dark strong.
Yeah.
Obviously Belgian yeast, and it makes me think of like brown sugar, molasses flavor, but anything you're more familiar with in about like ingredients in these beers?
Yeah, I mean, the Belgian yeast strain is really kind of, I mean, it pulls a lot of the weight when it comes to the flavors you're getting. Belgian yeast strains they do really well in higher alcohol environments. I mean, if this is like an American ale and it was 11%, you may have to use 2 different yeast strains to get the alcohol that high before the yeast kind of just give up and go, now I want to go to sleep. But Belgian yeasts have been doing it for a little bit longer than American beer yeast have, so they're here to party, and getting to 11% is not very difficult. And then depending on the kind of the temperature you fermented at, right, you could be getting a lot of those, like if it's a little bit warmer fermentation, esters, like fruity, phenolic, clove type nose, which this beer is starting to get now as it warms up. It is coming through for me, but yeah, so that's gonna just be the yeast kind of playing with the really complicated and interesting malt bill that a lot of these Belgian beers have too. This one, being no exception. And then the hops as well. I mean, it's it's definitely not a bitter beer. It's got about 15 IBUs, but it's important there, that the kind of sweetness doesn't go off the deep end, and it has something to kind of stop it. So the BJCP says, Saz or Sazzer type hops or English type hops is really common, and sure enough, nice. Saz is one of the hops in Mad Elf. So really like right in line with everything that the BJCP says keep an eye out for. Mad Elf is checking those boxes. But yeah, the yeast is big. Yeah,
Saz hops, I know them best is the flavor of most Pilsners. Mm-hmm. Is that?
Yep. Yeah, definitely a Czech. Originally, I believe, a Czech hop, and Czech Pilsners kind of have their own unique place in everyone's beer world, but it, again, not limited to that, and definitely kind of the grassier, kind of on the more noble side of hops, which makes sense here. You wouldn't want something big and citrusy that you may find in like a New World hop variety. You want something that'll play well with those fruity flavors, but not bring a whole other kind of fruit to the party. Although I'm sure breweries have done it, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but that's why this is a fun industry to be in, is that someone will probably do that to me one day. I'll drink it and go, well, this is the best. Why didn't someone put Citra in a Belgian Dark Strong 100 years ago? I'm an idiot. So, but until then, I think the BJCP's right on. I mean, of course they are, and Mad Elf is a pretty cool example of all this stuff. And really, like, again, the spiciness, I'm just waiting for more and more of it to show up in this beer as it is while it warms up here.
Yeah, I think any Belgian, especially higher ABV, something like this beer, some commercial examples, the first ones that come to my mind are like a Roquefort or Harrison, you just drank this. I saw you check it in on Untappd and Twitter with Chimay's Grand Reserve.
Yep.
A Westie 12. We probably all have a bunch of those sitting around.
Sitting room temperature somewhere in a shelf next to the window. Hopefully not. Don't do that if you have one. Just kidding. But yeah, I know the Roquefort stuff. That's another one that I may try to get onto this show. I love those, all the 8, the 10, all of them, all the St. Bernardus stuff. Like this kind of time of year, I feel like I've said it before on the podcast, but I love, hence me drinking that Grand Reserve from Chimay. Like I love big old Belgian beers when it's cold outside, because it's easy to say, give me a stout, and sure, give me a stout, give me an imperial stout, but also like this is just it's another way to get that same kind of alcoholic warmth and make the fire you may be sitting in front of even a little hotter, and the movie a little bit funnier or whatever, the conversation a little bit easier, but it's not a big old stout, it's something different. So yeah, pumped that we're drinking it today, and I can tell I'm going to be hunting for more Belgian beers. Hopefully more in the box, more in the Advent box, I can hope. We'll see.
And so, in finishing up our kind of loose walkthrough on a style guideline of a Belgian, Belgian Dark Strong.
Yeah.
A TLDR, like a Belgian double, but a little bit bigger. Similar flavors. Probably you could get lost in the differences between a Belgian Dark Strong and a Belgian Quad.
Sure.
But I think at the end of the glass, you'll be happy you tried to learn or understand either of those beers. And I definitely anticipate seeing Harrison drinking a lot of beers that are hard for me to pronounce in the next couple of months.
They get harder as you keep drinking them too, so it's okay. We're in that boat together.
And speaking of being in boats together,
yes.
Well, that's it. Speaking of being in boats together, here's a transition into the highlight of this show. Untappd released the year in beer statistics, and it's always my favorite time to see people share it on Instagram and Twitter. So, Harrison, a couple of changes this year. Graphically, in my opinion, it looks a lot cooler, so thanks for your help, Untappd design team.
Amazing. I know, it looks great.
Where do you want to begin covering the whole year in a couple of minutes here?
Sure. I think it's great to just kind of start with the beginning of 2020. And an easy stat that we kind of all saw this year highlighted on our year in beer stats was the first beers that we had this year. So I had, and I kind of remember this night. I do remember this night. First beer I had was on the 2nd of January. It was Stone Brewing's Never Ending Haze IPA, which is like a 4% New England, which was
no wonder
awesome.
You remember it.
That was it, and I tagged you in it, John. You were tagged in that check-in. I think actually it's because we were doing research for the what would be upcoming episode of Drinking Socially of low alcohol IPAs. We were about to do that episode. We did that episode 8 of this season, so we were kind of knew that going into 2020, and we're like, all right, let's try some beers out and see what to bring on the show. We just couldn't find Never Ending Haze again, I think, when this show happened, so it didn't make it on the podcast, but I loved it. It was a great way to start the year, and I tagged you because we were kind of going back and forth and trying to figure out what the beers we would talk about that episode.
And that trend was awesome when we had the girls on from Work for Your Beer. Yes. We did a podcast with 400-calorie IPAs, and I still get a lot of people asking me questions about low cal plus good flavor. That was a trend I didn't see coming this year.
You know, right?
Obviously, my first beer
Yes.
in 2020 happened a couple hours after 2020 began.
Smart.
And it was from Zipline in Nebraska, barrel-aged Calavera Stout. That was 13.5%.
All right.
So I was researching in the opposite direction. I don't remember that night. I don't remember who I tagged in that beer. I'm pretty sure I got that from Tavor back when they would ship to North Carolina.
Right.
Because otherwise there's no way I'm getting a beer from Lincoln, Nebraska. But it's 13.5% stout with, I think there was like vanilla and cocoa in it probably.
Ooh.
And I'm sure it was good. I would have to look at my Untappd check-in to remember what I really thought of it, though.
That's right. Exactly. That's why they exist. I love that. That's a great way to start the year, not messing around. And something else that was kind of new, at least the way we highlighted it this year on the Year in Beer stats, where they're purchased from locations. So kind of focusing a bit more on that, which makes sense this year. Obviously,
Especially,
people drinking at home. And I've always been a bit of a home body. So my number one purchase from location, like year over year on Untappd since I moved down to North Carolina, has been Hey Beer, which is a great bottle shop we brought up a couple times before on the show. So they were my number one again this year in terms of purchased at. However, something new to my list was another bottle shop in town called Fermental, which if you read Craft Beer and Brewing's annual list of best beer bar in every state, Fermental was actually named the best one in North Carolina last year, which was really cool.
Wow.
So I know, right? So it's really awesome. It's a tiny little house. It's actually like an old ranch house. It's each room is full of beer. So really cool spot. And beginning of quarantine, they started shipping to like locally doing deliveries. So I took full advantage of that, and my purchase from Checkins absolutely reflected exactly that. But yeah, again, another solid year for me drinking at home and enjoying the heck out of it. But what about you, John? What was kind of popping out early for you in the stats or the year in beer?
Yeah, I went more back to the basics, and I think honestly, COVID. I don't even want to say the word anymore. COVID was most of 2020. It's not like it was just a flash in the pan anymore. Yeah. But what I remember early on is, wondering. I have a lot of friends in the industry and wondering how this is going to affect the way I've gotten used to beers, new brewery, release, growler only, go to the tap room.
Yep.
And I wondered how that was all going to change. And early on,
that's right.
No one knew. Still, maybe no one knows what's happening. But early on, it was like a rush for like comfort and nostalgia. And people like Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale was a trending beer, and people were looking for those comfortable or value brands even.
Yeah.
And so my top-rated style in 2020 was a pale lager, and I owe a lot of that to New Anthem.
Yep.
They didn't open up delivery quite as much as Fermental did locally to me, but they did open up keg sales. So I finally put something on tap on my kegerator. I told you, Ashley, my wife, if you're listening, I told you we would use that thing eventually. Harrison, I was really excited. I looked through yours. Your top-rated style was a cider, and I feel like we owe that to the beer we had on the podcast earlier in the year.
Yeah, it was Blood Amulet from Bee Nectar. That was it, and that was such a fun. Looking back, that may have been one of my favorite episodes of this entire year because I walked into it really not knowing what to expect, a little apprehensive, and from like the first sniff and sip of that beer or cider, it was like, holy cow. Why I've waited this long? This is amazing. It was great. So yeah, it blew me away, and kind of fitting that on the year that you returned to basics, as did tons of the beer drinking world. I stepped out of my shell. What a year to pick to come out of my comfort zone. It was
beer, cider. That was out. I remember drinking that. I wish I had more. I saw. Brian McCaskey in the podcast group on Facebook recently got a bottle of it. Whether you embrace cider or you still turn your nose up to it, I challenge you to drink a Blood Amulet from Bee Nectar and walk away thinking anything but
Yeah, and
that was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to enjoy it. I mean, we'll definitely have Beer Nectar on again, hopefully soon, because of course we didn't even touch their meads yet, so that definitely deserves its own episode. We'll see when that happens. I think it's just a question of when, not if. Something else that I really liked and kind of got a chuckle out of that we're highlighting this year is the top 3 breweries. And John, you and me, ours were very similar, which makes sense. We do drink beer together, although be it virtually all the time. But for both of us, number 1 brewery was something local, which again was something we saw this year across all of Untappd. Is, if you weren't going to an old standby, you were going, the quickest trip outside your door to some local brewery and supporting there first, which is great. And John and I were frequent supporters of Flying Machine Brewing Company, both our number 1 brewery of the year, and they have created some awesome stuff. We just had a few episodes ago the collab they did with Edmund's Oast Pillow Fort. That was something to behold.
That was a great beer.
Yeah, it really was. And I remember early on maybe actually it was about the summer, I think, their Benevolence, I believe, their Vienna Lager, which is, I think, a top 10 rated lager on Untappd. That beer, just like, I was all about it. I got it, in the summer whenever they released it, which just blew me away. So that definitely contributed to a couple check-ins there to make Fly Machine my top brewery.
That was 2020 taught me that I don't need to leave my subjectively small town to drink amazing beer.
Yeah.
And it also taught me that some of my friends were leaving town, and it was important to remind them, hey, when you're up there, bring back some beer.
Bring back some stuff.
I think I probably drank more, not internationally, but more beers from around the country where Tavor couldn't ship me beers from outside of my area. Any friend that traveled, it was really cool when they would come back and they would have a couple of beers. Colby, who wrote the NFL blog with us, he brought me back some beer from Rotunda a few times and introduced me to them. Turns out I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, they cracked your top 3 as well. And then New Anthem, another local brewery, both in our top 3. And those guys, when we talked about them before, we had Neon God, one of their IPAs on the podcast in the past, earlier this year, but they crank out some amazing stuff. So both of those local breweries cracked the top for us. And true to my word from last year, Hopfly, which is kind of my brewery of 2019, and I kind of made a promise myself drinking more of it this year. I did. They also broke in my top 3, and they're somewhat local. They're another North Carolina brewery. But yeah, I mean, I can't stay away from anything they crank out. So that was, glad the stats showed me that. I'd be worried I would be drinking all their beer for nothing, but they made it on my year in beer, so all worth it.
My wish list breweries were Wander Beyond from England. Haven't got that yet. And Angry Chair from Florida. Got close.
Yeah.
But, okay, I'm just going to move those on to my wish list for 2021.
That's fine. A lot of people are doing that.
Yeah. What about badges? I obnoxiously am sitting at 1,999 badges. I know it'll update as the year continues. You've got until December 31 to continue proliferating your year in beer stats.
True.
Harry, you're straggling, bud.
I know. I only have 1,579 badges, but in my own defense, I did do some work this year. So it's showing you this year, as you guys saw, total badges, but also badges earned just in 2020. And I did some work. I had 425 of those badges, so almost a third of the badges that I have as a user I earned this year. And just edging out John with 370 badges earned this year. So I did some work there in the badge department.
A great testament to how good of a salesman you are, Harrison.
That's something.
I'm crushing you in badges, but you just made me look like a fool.
Is that what happened? I blacked out.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And this definitely, we've talked a few times on the show, right? Like, is someone going to earn an 8 badge check-in? I think if it hasn't been definitively 8, we've seen some people share in the podcast group. You don't even,
10,
you used to have to try and like drink your 55th Pale Ale at a bowling alley on a holiday wearing red shoes to earn a 4-5 Badger. But it's gotten easier for you, I guess harder for me. So let's move on.
Fair enough. Oh, yeah, and Drinking Buddies. That was also a fun highlight, and I'm sure it surprises nobody that John and I were both each other's drinking buddies with perhaps some other people as well, but not important. It'd be weird if we didn't crack the each other's top 3.
That'd be an awkward.
Buddies.
We'll just edit that out.
A lot of questions. But nope, here we are. Here we are, making sense.
So let's close out our year in beer review, And so let's close this out with a little game I'm making up right now called Was Harrison Right About 2020? At the end of season 2, we made some predictions leading into 2020. That was risky.
That was silly of us.
Harry, in one word or more, how do we fare on our 4 top predictions? We talked about how 4-pack 16-ounce cans were going to be all the rage.
Yep, duh, and that happened absolutely. But it was trending that direction. Although now I feel like, right, every picture I see from every brewery in my Instagram feed is of a 16-ounce can they can grab in a 4-pack. And I mean, actually, to be fair, there's been so much more to-go beer sales done out of breweries this year and bottle shops and so on. It makes sense that yes, 4-pack 16-ounce cans probably being consumed now more than ever before. I mean, we're in the middle of a can shortage, so we do know that it's definitely impacted the way that how people consume beer. So I think we were right on there. And we also said variety packs too, would kind of more breweries to start doing them. And I don't know if that's the case, but certainly, when I go to a local grocery store, I'm seeing like now New Belgium has like 2 or 3 different variety packs each season. Southern Tier, very similar. Stone has one right now where it's like the 12 beers of December or Christmas or whatever. There's a lot of I feel like maybe it's not more breweries doing it, but I'm seeing more variety packs from breweries than ever, which is great. And you have to wonder how much of that is in response to kind of people taking less trips out of the house, wanting to get more variety when they go to the grocery store now, maybe once every 10 days. What can I get in a single purchase that'll kind of keep me interested? And I mean, absolutely, you're able to do that now. So that was really, again, we had obviously no idea this was happening, but that one kind of fell right in our lap.
That was probably the easiest one to predict. And it's, please, more 16-ounce cans. We saw more, when you check in on Untappd, you can tag what you're drinking it from. Obviously, cans and bottles, this was a great year for them as opposed to draft. And there's some sad and some positive in there is that we had to adapt, but we still drank good beer. So point number 2 of 4, the rise of the lager. I'm pretty sure I predict this every single year, but how'd we do?
Correct. I mean, for you, it was your top whatever rated style. So John nailed it. But as John said, I mean, I think it was this year was just as one example, Sam Adams Boston Lager is one of the best years that beer has had in a long time in terms of just, I mean, I got like 4 from my fridge right now. So I'm a testament to that. But I mean, probably not for the reasons we thought, but certainly people returning to those beers that maybe kind of defined their early beer experience. A lot of them are probably lagers, especially for the U.S. So I think that's pretty also, perhaps maybe not the rise, maybe a return to the lager, maybe more accurate.
That makes,
but certainly, happened.
So here's one. I wish I could just include like a womp 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 sound effect, but
you did it perfect.
We predicted that ordering beer from the internet was going to make a big move forward in 2020.
And it did. And not for the reasons we thought. We kind of saw things like Tavour and Beer Drop becoming more popular, and that's what we were kind of expecting to see in 2020. And indeed, that happened. But also, again, now as we all know, pretty much every brewery, bottle shop, I mean, any place out there has an e-commerce store if they didn't before, really kind of have to. Given the time. So absolutely more beer being bought on your phone, on a tablet, online than ever. But again, so really interesting list we had here. I guess we
so far I think we're shooting almost 100% subjectively.
There you go.
And we predicted a lot of mergers / acquisitions. If you're anything like me, 2020 is a blur that gets mixed up with both 2019 and the late 90s.
Yes.
So there were definitely some brewery mergers and acquisitions. Harrison, anything that jumps out at you?
Well, yeah, on the brewery side, I think the CBC finally became 100% owned by InBev, which is kind of like, happening slowly over many years. And there are probably, maybe more mergers and acquisitions of breweries in the coming months. But something to look closer to us is that, I'm sure hopefully everyone's seen by now, that a couple months ago, Untappd, so Net Glass company that owns Untappd and Beer Advocate, they also acquired an app called Osner, where you can buy beer on your phone, just like I was talking about, which is pretty cool. I'm actually working with that team right now. And Hop Culture, which just was announced the other week. So not the mergers and acquisitions we saw coming, but pretty big ones that we saw get covered kind of all over the place as they happened. So definitely very exciting times for us. Keep it tuned here for season 4. More excitement, perhaps, dovetailing into those acquisitions. We'll see. But that also happened. Again, not how we saw it, but no way to say it any other way. Definitely.
I think that's the trick to predicting the future. Right. Is just to
learned
predict.
A lot.
It's gonna be. Exactly. When winter comes, it's going to be colder. A lot of people looking for warm inside places.
That's it. You could sell a lot of farmers' almanacs with those kinds of predictions, John. And they do
Nostradamus who? Yeah.
That was great. So we did pretty well. Good.
And we've had a little bit of time to let this Belgian Dark Strong warm up, Harrison. I see you got a couple of sips left in your glass. Has the taste changed much?
It really, yes, it has. For me now, it's like I'm getting actually more chocolate notes.
Okay.
Still tons of cherry on the nose with like that kind of a little bit of sharp little booziness, but in a great way. A little bit of honey there. And yeah, it is. It's little. It's even like it's like kind of chocolatey cherry, and then it ends with like a little bit of some kind of spice, allspice, let's say. What about you? What is experiencing over there? What's happening?
Most of mine's ethereal. We did an episode a little while ago called God Save the Queen, where we drank some beers from the UK, from Siren specifically. Mm-hmm. And as this is warmed up, after I sip and after it leaves my mouth, I get like honey-covered dark fruit, and I just imagine that's what Christmas is like in the UK. It's like these exquisite, almost like the baking show where everybody's in a tent and they're amazing bakers.
Yes.
Like that's what I view. Like if somebody would on that baking show, if they would give them Mad Elf, we would have some record-breaking activity. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense, but that's where I'm at with this beer now that it's warmed up. It's 11%, give or take, right?
It is. It's doing what it should be doing. It's creating magical dances of sugar plums and British people baking in our heads or what have you.
And it's been drank by a lot of people. To cover some Untappd data, overall this polls a 3.8 rating. It's been checked in over 350,000 times.
Yeah.
Generally, you can find this. It's made by Tröegs, who is still, as far as I can tell, independent, run by two brothers and a great group of people. So it's mainly available on the East Coast, but I'm sure it'll find some friendly distribution if you have family visiting from the East Coast.
That's right.
Tröegs, if you're listening, put your beer menu on Untappd so people can follow you on there. Get your tap room listed. Wild Elf, Naked Elf. People want to see. I want to see.
So everybody does.
Make it easier for people to see what you're pouring. Subtle nudge there.
Exactly. A lot of angry elves out here wanting to get some Mad Elf, wanting to see what else you have. I agree. And aside from beer, the Mad Elf beer, Tröegs did make a Mad Elf beer cheese you can enjoy alongside this if you're able to get your hands on some of it. Readily available in Pennsylvania. Not sure about other places they distribute to. But they've done this for 2 other beers. Their Tröegs, which is their Doppelbock. They have a beer cheese that came out last year. Perpetual, their IPA. Earlier this year, 100% of the milk is from Pennsylvania dairy farms. This is pretty cool. But yeah, so this is and this beer though, if you can't get your hands on the Mad Elf beer cheese, don't worry about it. This beer goes well with a lot of food, and actually Tröegs gives you a great breakdown and more detail on their website about what they recommend and what they don't recommend to enjoy with the beer. But some of the highlights for me, this beer is going to be kind of complimentary. Food item would be glazed ham, so sold there.
Everything.
You had me on glaze, but then you double had me on ham. A contrasting flavor, which is always fun to kind of like find something that kind of maybe like, I don't know, pushes back a little bit on the beer flavor you may be enjoying, is like aged cheddar. Coconut was another one they put there, which is pretty cool. And maybe it's fistfuls of coconut. I don't know if that's what they meant, but take that for what it's worth. However, they say adverse, stay away from salmon and peanuts. Not going to be what you want to experience here. And perhaps most notably, peppermint. A lot of peppermint candy floating around the house these days. Tröegs is saying, nope, kibosh, eat that, and then have Mad Elf later. So there's much more that kind of break down of some seasonal food, some food like coconut that's maybe not. It may go well or not with Mad Elf, so go ahead and check it out there. But that's always fun to kind of learn about, play a little grab bag there, build a little charcuterie board to go with your beer. Tröegs does a great job of giving you some recommendations on where to start.
That sounds, now I'm just excited about food. We need to get more into this of like blind taste testing. And
hungry.
And you make good points. The peppermint with a stout, amazing. Yeah. Imagining it with this beer, horrendous.
Too much happening, yeah.
Same thing with almost any fish. This beer there's too much power with this beer that you might as well not eat fish. Just drink 2 Mad Elves and
call it a night. Have some cheese and go to bed.
So if you can get the Mad Elf beer cheese and you're friendly on social media, tag me and Harrison in a picture. Go hit at That Beer Podcast. You'll find us on Twitter, Instagram. But I want to see what it looks like. I want to vicariously pretend to eat this cheese through your Instagram photos. Other than that, 2020 was certainly a year that we hope we'll never remember. But thanks to Year in Beer from Untappd, you can kind of block out all the crappy parts of 2020 and just focus on the awesome stuff, the beers we drank together.
Yes. And next week, we are going to be finishing up Season 3. Whoa. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna go out with a bang. We're drinking something that's bomb diggity. Ho ho ho! Man, am I excited! So there might be
so subtle hints,
some Easter eggs in there. Maybe that's a hint. I think it's just confusing.
Ho ho bomb.
Ho ho
You're
ho!
right.
Right. Well. I tried.
So thanks for listening. Show notes will be available at podcast.untappd.com, as well as the show itself and the YouTube videos. If you have any questions or feedback, we invite you to connect with us or Untappd on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Otherwise,
we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
A little bit in there. Just a little bit.
Just enough to walk into the kitchen and, I'm going to
find some
right
cheese.
We need to do cheese with every episode.
Yeah, right.